hello again. And so, oops, let me, where's my screen? Okay, right here. All right, awesome. Yeah, let's get started. And so this is gonna be question number 7. And so last time we did the AND expression. So during the discussion, we talked about implementing the AND special form. And so now we wanna move on to doing define. And so define is a bit more involved than the AND expression, but it is like a similar format to, what's it called? It's a similar format to how we want to do AND. And so special forms, remember that in the case of our interpreter, this also applies to your schema interpreter. Normally, we want to, if I had maybe like the expression plus 1, 2, minus 1, 2, a, what would happen here is that I would evaluate the operand and go like operator and go like, this is not a special form. And so what I would do after is that since it's not a special form, I can go ahead, evaluate each of the operands. So this turns into a -1. This turns, if the variable a was like the number 3, this would turn into 3. And then add them together and I would get like 2 out of it. And so that's the normal method. And so if you see in this case, this line right here, we're evaluating this operator and applying it on the rest. And so the rest is like the elements -1, 2, and a. And I'm applying that calc eval operation on each of those elements, and those should turn into like -1 and 3. But in the case of a special form, this is different because if we recall, if I had define, so this is similar to the AND expression in the case in which we don't want to evaluate stuff immediately. But if I had like define a1, well, we don't want to define a immediately. We don't want to evaluate a, because if you think about this, if I go like a equals 1, and I didn't define a yet, a has no value associated with it. We don't even know what a is, and so it's gonna like error right there. We're just trying to define what a is, but if we try to evaluate a, it's gonna error. I guess I kind of butchered that explanation, but hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, and so we want to, so that's the reasoning behind why define is a special form, similar with AND. And so we don't want to immediately evaluate any of the operands. We want to go into some special function, and as you can see here, we have some special function called like define, eval define of expression. And so some things to note about this. Right here, just to note, is that they have like a bunch of steps on what we want to do to like create some binding. And so first of all, since we want to like store what a variable corresponds to, we're gonna have like a dictionary. So if I want to like look up what the value a is, I could go like maybe like bindings of a, and then that would like return me like the number 3 or something. And so that's what the bindings dictionary is for. And then how we're gonna like use the define method to like create a binding is that when we see define, we're gonna call the special form eval define on like the rest of the body. And then what's gonna happen here is that if I say define a1, I'll like put it right here. What's gonna happen here is that we're not gonna evaluate the a, but we're going to evaluate the 1, and then we're gonna go take our dictionary, so bindings, and then this value, this key value a, we're gonna set its corresponding value to be whatever the next expression evaluates to. So in this case, 1 is just 1, so we're setting bindings of that a string to 1. And if you imagine, if we look up variables, we have to handle it here. So if we see like a variable that we need to like figure out what it is, we can look it up in the dictionary and it should be all good. And then so and let's get started. And so first of all, we can maybe start off with like these first 2 lines. Actually, before I get started, once again, take some time to do it by yourself. And if you get stuck, feel free to like just walk through this video. And All right. And so starting off, this part is pretty similar to what we had earlier. And so if we have like a pair expression, we first want to take a look at what the operator is. And if the operator turns out to be a special form, then we know we want to call the corresponding like special form function. In this case, it will be eval define. And so with the first part, if so this is from the earlier problem. If we're handling ands, if we find out the operator is and, we want to call eval and. And so I'm going to put expression dot first is equal to the string and. So remember that expressions dot first, since everything's represented as a pair object, the first element is going to be the operator, and we want to check that if that's equal to and. Yeah, and the second part is pretty similar. So if it's equal to define, we want to do some special thing with define. And yeah, that's going to be that part. And then let's go on to the next. And so inside this eval define function, we kind of outlined what we want to do. We don't want to do anything with like the first parameter. So the a right here, that is going to stay a string. But in the case of the next expression, the 1, we want to evaluate that and assign a to be that value. And then so how do we get that variable, and how do we get that parameter? And so how we get the variable is expressions. So one thing to note is that we pass in expressions.rest into eval define. And so we're basically getting rid of that first value, so the define. So we're left with a and 1. And so how do we get that first value? Well, we do it via expressions.first. And so we could say var equals expressions.first. And we can say that the value equals like the second thing. So in this case, it would be expressions.rest.first. And what do we want to do here? We want to evaluate that value that we have. So if you imagine this 1 could be like maybe plus 2, 3. We don't want to keep it as plus 2, 3 because that's not how the define function works. We want to convert it to 5. Oh, I just realized I am blocking it. So if you imagine if I had like plus 2, 3, replacing that 1, if I just like bound a to that plus 2, 3, it's not going to work out very well. It's not going to become 5, which is what we want. And so to do that, we have to actually evaluate this expression. So this should become 5. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go like evaluated value is going to be equal to calc eval called on that value. And that's going to turn that plus 2, 3 into a 5. And if you imagine if we called calc eval on 1, it would still be 1. And yeah, and then afterwards, what do we want to do? We want to assign the binding to be equal to, of that variable to be equal to that evaluated value. So we're going to say binding of that variable var is equal to that evaluated value. So a is equal to 5 or like 1, whatever it was. But yeah, and then last but not least, remember that the define function should return the string or like the name of the thing that you just evaluated, like the variable that you just assigned. And so we're going to return var right here. And so var would be this like string a if we assigned it to like 1 in this example right here. But yeah, and so we handled the define expression thing. But last but not least, we want to handle if it's like a variable. And I mean like the calc eval part. And so here's an example right here in this doc test. If I just had like put a, actually I'm going to erase everything. If I just had the string a, what calc eval would do is it would go into the expression, it's not a pair, and it would go into all of these elifs. And so what we need to do is we need to check if this like string a, this variable a, is inside of our bindings. And if it is, we can like get the corresponding value to it and return it. So if we call calc eval on this a, it should return a 1 according to this doc test right here, if we would define a to be 1. And so in this expression right here, what we're going to do is we're going to check if that value is inside of bindings. So if a is inside of that bindings dictionary, then we want to give us that 1. And so we can go if expression. So expression is the string a in this doc test right here, the variable a. And so if expression in bindings, then what do we want to do well, we want to get whatever it corresponds to and return it. And so we would go like return bindings index that the value corresponding to that expression, which is the string a, the variable a. And then, yeah, that should return 1, and we should be good to go here. And yeah, here's the solution right here. Pretty much does the same thing, minus some differences, but it's like same functionality. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to like let me know, and hope you have a great day.